Welcome to Sinister Heroes. I'm your host, Danny Iniquitous. Thank you for tuning in. If you're new to the channel, this is a channel about Dungeons and Dragons where we try and take a darker tone with everything we do here. So if you like edgier kind of content, definitely hit those like and subscribe buttons. A big thank you to our Patreon supporters. We love you guys. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter, the link is in the description. And a big thank you to our good friends at Dice Legion. Use the promo code Sinister, get 10% off all of your purchases. That link is also in the description. We are doing a big push to hit 2,000 subscribers by the end of the year. We are halfway there. This is a very big push. We can't do this without you guys. Thank you so much for all of your supports, for all those who have subscribed. You guys have done amazing things for us. We're so grateful to have met you guys and conversed with you guys, and we're just so happy to see us grow so much. Without further ado, we're going to jump into this week's video. We're talking about Dragonborn. So with this video, we're going to try something a little different than we do normally with our videos about species, and we're going to try and incorporate a little bit of lore into it. So this might be a little longer. We're trying something new. If there's definitely something you liked about this video, please comment about it so we can keep doing it, so we can kind of really evolve our ability here and grow into something a little bit better. But what we're going to talk about is the Dragonborn, and we're going to try and build a Dragonborn character and connect it as closely to the lore as we can, while still hitting some of the great evil things that we do love and enjoy. The Dragonborn are actually surprisingly new to the world of D&D, specifically this iteration of the world. And what I mean is they've only been on Toril, which is the name of the planet that all the campaigns are set in, for about 100 or so years. They originally come from a planet called Aber. And Aber is almost an identical planet to Toril because beforehand they were just one planet. And then the spell plague happened. There was a war between the primordials and the divine and all the gods, and the god of all the gods separated the two. And so the primordials lived in one world called Aber, and everyone else kind of lived in Toril. And that's kind of the way the worlds were set. The spell plague happened, and the Dragonborn city was pulled from Aber and brought into Toril. That's how we got Dragonborn as we know them in 5th edition. Because of that, who the Dragonborn are is very different from everything else that grew up and was created and lived in Toril. And what I mean by that is, in the world of Aber, since all the gods and the deities were here on Toril, there were no clerics, there were no deities, so warlocks and things like that didn't happen. Everything was straight from primordials and dragons. Dragons created the Dragonborn and made them as slaves, and it was a really harsh living condition for them, and we're going to get into that in just a moment. But understand, this is why, lore-wise, there aren't a lot of clerics or warlocks that are Dragonborn. And this comes for two reasons. First and foremost, they prayed for freedom from slavery, for the strength to survive and endure and break their chains. And those prayers were never answered. So their entire history is built on gods not answering them. Their beliefs don't work. It's all about the strength of what you can do. And fostering that kind of mentality created this idea of honor and being bound to your clan, because that's all you had to survive. No great deity was going to come down and save you, and the things that created you, the dragons, are going to keep your head in the ground as long as humanly possible. So that really builds this perspective of what a Dragonborn is in relation to their religions. Now, a big thing that comes up very often is paladins. Paladins in 5th edition aren't necessarily beholden to a deity. A lot of the times in the older editions, that was a necessary part of it when they're creating the paladin from the ground up. Right now, paladins are based on their oath, on their word, on their honor and their ability to keep that oath. Dragonborn follow a similar mentality. They follow that way with carrying the honor of their clan and their people. So in order to do the right thing for them, they follow their strict rules of honor and following those. So being a paladin works very, very well for them, because the paladin's strength comes from their oath, not a deity. When this comes to warlocks, because Dragonborn inherently don't look to deities for help, they look for their clan and for other people who can actually tangibly help them. They don't often become warlocks either. Again, this is lore based, so if you wanted to make a Dragonborn warlock, and a lot of the times, especially the original iterations with their stats and how that worked, really bred towards that kind of an idea. But the lore base is, if a Dragonborn cannot do it himself, a Dragonborn won't do it. A Dragonborn wouldn't go out and ask a deity for help. They are not like that. They can do it themselves. They have to be the best. They have to make this work, and it's going to work through their hard work, their diligence, and their incredibly powerful blood of the Dragonborn. That's what's going to make them do whatever thing that they're trying to do. They're never going to settle for just getting their foot in the door. They have to run everything. They have to push themselves as far as humanly possible. That's really a huge part of what makes the Dragonborn the Dragonborn. That's why they make great sorcerers and paladins, because all of that strength comes from within. It's not enough for them just to show up and to do their part. They can't join an army just to defend the city. They have to lead the army to defend the city. That's being Dragonborn. And that is taught to them, and it's so infused in their world that they started to build their families and their clans into this great thing, that the honor of the clan matters more than the Dragonborn. So they do these things to pursue this great name for themselves, because that great name carries the clan with them, and it pushes them to further notoriety, prosperity, lands, whatever it was. It all happens because Dragonborns fought their hardest to bring the clan that far. And that breaks down into a lot of the mentalities. They're very strong-willed. They're very passionate. And that's why they make great sorcerers and paladins, because there's a lot of passion behind that. There's a lot of belief in oneself, confidence. And that all kind of stems from where charisma is as a stat. So it really breeds well into that kind of mentality. Because of that, they would make great barbarians, because barbarians are rageful. They are full of passion. Those kinds of things really, really coalesce very well when you consider what a dragon is through the lore and how that transcends down. They have a lot of pride in themselves. The great thing about having all this passion and pride and being a Dragonborn and having this ambition that you can't quell, that you can't stop, is because they make great evil characters. A lot of the great villains have a strong passion that drives them, something that's unrelenting in their life. That's so built into the Dragonborn that it makes sense that if they were going to go and hate a city, they would devote their lives to destroying it and become a powerful warlord, become some sort of, treasonous entity there that sets up all these horrible circumstances and is just slowly tearing that whole city apart, pulling other people to join in that same mentality, and now leading bandits or whatever it is, or a coup, in order to destroy the nobility that are in control of that area. Dragonborn can do that, and it's so easy for them because it tracks so well with how their lore is and who they are as a person. So being horrible, evil entities and consuming that passion for that kind of a drive comes very, very easy with them. And if you take the lore of dragons, it's a great way to tie it, and I like to do this when I play Dragonborn. The metallic dragons are the good dragons. That's, they all worship Bahamut. They're the, the brass, the copper, those kinds of dragons. Those are all good dragons. The chromatic dragons, the reds, the greens, the blues, all of them are evil. And they once went through this whole civil war. It was an intense thing. It's a huge part of the whole dragon lore. It's essentially what happened between Bahamut and Tiamat, and their followers just went to town on each other and ultimately ended up destroying their overall strength, which only happened on Toril, because in Aber that never happened, and dragons ended up being dominion over everything. So when you take that into consideration, you can pull that bloodline from dragons that created the Dragonborn, and really tie that into who they are. I like playing evil dragons, so Dragonborn and pulling that chromatic color to them really works well for me. That really pulls something to me that really makes it feel like it's part of who I was. It's part of my legacy, my clan, my name all follows the pathway of this, like red dragon or whatever it is. I like to make that kind of work well because I like to pull from existing things that already exist in the world, because I like having other characters react that way, specifically, especially if they know the lore. It's a great way for me to be tied into the setting and the story and what the DM is trying to do, because so much of it is accurate to that. So if I wanted to play a good Dragonborn, I would do things like pulling chromatic colors to my character and try and using tokens and artwork that reflect that. One of the great misconceptions about Dragonborn is that they'll worship Bahamut, and there are some that do. There's an organization, I forget what they're called, because they're a good organization, and that really just isn't up my alley. But they do. They worship Bahamut, and all the other Dragonborn hate them for it. They're shunned, they're looked down upon, it's considered disrespectful to their entire clan to be worshipping a deity. Not only that, to be worshipping a dragon god that wasn't there for them when they were suffering under dragons. Like, it's a big no-no within the community. So Dragonborn, with following Bahamut, it's a good thing. It's a good deity. There's tenets to be a better person, to be a benefit to the world around you. But your people hate you for it. You're supposed to practice that religion in secret, in the dark, so no one knows that you do it when you're in your home. And that is a great hook for a character, to have that duality of weight on you. So that way, it's much easier for you to be an adventurer and to uphold the tenets of Bahamut, and then go home and just shrink. And feel the weight of just not being able to speak or to say what you truly believe, or where you got the strength to do these things, because it would cost you your honor. So in order to bring this a little bit to the actual mechanics of it, of what it is to be a Dragonborn, ability scores, because of Tashas, you can kind of put it anywhere, and I think that kind of makes a lot of sense anyway. But the important thing to note is the importance of your breath weapon. That is something that holds great value to you. That is inherent to being a Dragonborn. Without it, you're just a big, scary lizard. And it's important to you to identify yourself with that. It should matter to you. You're lighting a candle as a Dragonborn. You want to use your breath weapon. You don't want to use magic or flint and tinder. Like, you want to use your dragon ability, because that's who you are. When fizbans came out, it made Dragonborn exponentially better. So you had different variations depending on if you were chromatic or metallic. You had options with some of your breath weapons if you were metallic, whereas if you were chromatic, you really didn't. But being chromatic, that's kind of your thing, just to do damage. Your evil, destruction, and suffering is kind of a huge portion of that. But they did give you the ability to replace an attack with your breath weapon. So if you had 2 attacks, you could use your breath weapon twice. And you could use your breath weapon a number of times equal to your proficiency modifier, but always when you replace a regular attack with it. So fighters attacking 4 times a round, you can just not do that and just breathe 4 times. And it's devastating. Please don't do that to your DMs. It's hard enough as it is, but that'll do a good chunk of damage. But it's so important to you. It's a big portion of who your character is. When I'm building Dragonborn, I tend to go into the specific things about certain kinds of dragons and what their colors mean and how they kind of act and some of the quirks that are based around it. And I pull those into building my Dragonborn. And I encourage you all to do so, because it really gives you this great tie-in to what you can see in the world. There's 2 things about the physiology of the Dragonborn that I need to discuss. First and foremost, Dragonborn are created specifically by dragons for the purpose of being slaves and cannon fodder and things like that. They do not have wings, and they do not have tails, and they do not have dark vision. The exception to this is the Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, which does have dark vision. Though that was built kind of by Matt Mercer and Critical Role, so I don't know exactly how their lore ties in directly with the D&D lore, or how far their history goes. They kind of just really took their own liberties, which, you know, I'd expect them to do so. But that being the only exception, I think that was by design by the dragons. And the reason why I say this is because of the lack of dark vision, they would be susceptible to retaliations in case they revolted, which the Dragonborn did a bunch of times. They did it pretty regularly until they finally won their freedom. Not having the ability to fly and tails would really help with flight. I think that's why they all have them. And dark vision would help them fight at night and give them a severe advantage to dragons fighting the Dragonborn. So I think that was specific by design to ensure that the Dragonborn were always going to be weaker to the dragons, even the youngest dragons that were in existence. It's important to kind of take that into consideration, because a lot of the times you see these things and it's an immediate deterrent. A lot of the reasons why Dragonborn were not a very strong species and when the first Player's Handbook came out was because of the lack of dark vision. But when you incorporate the lore behind it for being a reason to still exist and still persevere and still fight harder, like the Dragonborn do, and take that responsibility of yourselves to be greater than everything else, it's a challenge, but it makes sense, and it has like purpose and weight to it because it's built through the lore and the history of its people. And I like it when you can connect things like that and build a character that has that incorporated, because now you have history. Now you have a reason. Now the world matters to you because this is everything you know. This is your world. And those important distinctions should really fit in, because dragons and Dragonborn don't really get along. Half dragons and Dragonborn really don't get along. Everything said and done, we're going to bring this video to a close. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for sticking it out to the end. Definitely let us know about things you liked in this video, things you didn't, any of the great stories you had, any of the characters you've built or experiences you had with the Dragonborn. We want to hear about it. It's great to communicate with you guys, and we absolutely love that. Big thank you to our Patreon supporters. Thank you so much for everything you do for the channel. It's a blessing to have you guys in your lives, and we're so grateful to have you. Big shout out to our good friends at Dice Legion. Use the promo code Sinister. The link to the Patreon and Dice Legion is in the description. We're doing a huge push of 2,000 subscribers, so if you made it this far, you like what you saw, definitely consider hitting that subscribe button. And without further ado, thank you so much for giving a spooky kid a chance.